In middle of the tension going on between India and China and the call for the boycott of Chinese products, it's high time for us to also understand what China really owns in India. Today in the episode of My Money Universe, we are going to explore how China is trying to capture and influence the booming young market of India, which is a serious threat to our nation. First of all, I want to request all of you to take this from a point of knowledge and understanding of what's going on, instead of hating on our own hardworking Indian entrepreneurs and companies. Unlike other countries like Pakistan, Sri Lanka, Myanmar, Bangladesh and many others who have Chinese investments in the physical infrastructure of their country, China has other strategy when it comes to India. That's why to understand the threat, you need to have a closer look into it. They are investing heavily in India's startup universe, which gives them disproportionate value than the small price they are paying for it currently. See, right now India's startup universe is at a very nascent stage and everything is still far away from their real growth and value. So investing in these startups right now creates huge value for investors in coming next decades. So with $100 million, you can be a part of $100 of billion worth of future businesses. Because India needs these apps and systems to support the needs and requirements of young generation and companies. Little later, I will explain in detail why China is investing in these companies and how it can be a threat to our nation. Over the course of 1 year, Gateway House has conducted a deep study of Chinese investments in India as part of a larger research project on Chinese investments in India's neighborhood. You can check out the research down below in the video's description. The findings are remarkable. 18 of the 30 Indian unicorns have a Chinese investor. This means that China is embedded in Indian society, the economy, and a technology ecosystem that influences it. Unlike a port or a railway line, these are invisible assets in small sizes, rarely over $100 million, and made by the private sector, which doesn't cause immediate alarm. China's FDI has grown fivefold since 2014, and as of December 2019, its cumulative investment in India exceeded $8 billion. Out of which $4 billion went to funding of 92 Indian startups.
This does not cover investments made by funds based out of Singapore and elsewhere, where the ultimate owner is Chinese. So the actual investment in India will be higher.
So let's see what China owns in India and things we are using in our everyday life. We use Paytm in everyday transactions, and according to their blog on website, they owned over 50% of the total payment gateway transaction of our country in 2019. It is one of the first Indian companies to receive funding from Chinese e-commerce company Alibaba. Currently, and financial affiliate company of the Chinese Alibaba Group owns 29.71% in Paytm. SAIF partners own 18.56%. So total of 48.27% is owned by Chinese investors in Paytm. Ola is one of India's mobile apps-based transportation network companies based in Bangalore and was developed by ANI Technologies Private Limited. Its value is around $6.5 billion. Chinese internet giant Tencent owns 10.39% in Ola. Also, the Chinese car app company Didi Kuaidi owns a small part in Ola. Other Chinese investors in minority are SteadView Capital, Sailing Capital and China, Eternal Yield International Limited, China Eurasian Economic Cooperation Fund. Flipkart is India's one of the two biggest e-commerce businesses, and China has invested around $300 million through SteadView Capital and Tencent Holdings in it. Oyo is the biggest Indian hotel chain that services in different segments of hotels, homes and living spaces. Didi Chuxing and China Lodging Group has their investment in Oyo, including a partnership to operate company in China itself. Food delivery services. India has two major players in app-based food delivery services, Swiggy and Zomato, and both of them have Chinese fundings in it. Swiggy has Meituan Dianping owning 6.35% and also has funding from Hill House Capital, Tencent Holdings, SAIF partners of around $500 million. Whereas in Zomato, Alibaba Group, Shunvi Capital have invested around $200 million. Some of the other major players of the Indian industry that are deeply embedded in our daily necessities and have Chinese investments in them are Byju's, Big Basket, Delivery, Dream11, Hike, Make My Trip, Policy Bazaar, Quicker, Rivigo, Snapdeal and Udaan, and many others like these. So as you can see, what we use on the daily basis and are an integral part of our lifestyle are mostly have funds from China. The phones we use to the apps we download the most all have Chinese presence in it. TikTok, owned by ByteDance, is already one of the most popular apps in India, overtaking YouTube. Chinese phones cover 70 to 75% of Indian phone market. Let's see why China sees such success in Indian tech and what threats we can have from it. One of the reasons is because Indian startups rely disproportionately on overseas venture capital funding. All startups worth over $1 billion are foreign funded. Some like Flipkart have been acquired outright. India still does not have a Sequoia or Google of its own. Reliance Industries through Jio is trying to replicate Alibaba's successful model in India, but they just started. Most Indian VC financiers are wealthy individuals or family offices and cannot make the 100 million commitments needed to finance startups through their early losses. For instance, Paytm incurred a loss of Rs 3,690 in FY19, while Flipkart lost Rs 3,837 crore over the year. That leaves Western and Chinese investors as the dominant players in the Indian startup space, and that's why China has seen such success in funding in India. Now let's see what kind of threats we can have from Chinese funding. These investments bring up three concerns for India: data security, propaganda, and platform control. Chinese companies such as Alibaba and Tencent have their own ecosystems, which include online stores, payment gateways, messaging services, etc. etc. An investment by a Chinese firm can pull the Indian economy into this ecosystem, which may mean loss of control over data. Typically, in investments by a consortium of venture capitalists, one of the partners take the lead in advising the startup. If Alibaba or Tencent is playing this role, it can encourage the startups to use pre-existing Chinese solutions for its tech requirements, again leading to loss of control over data. If this process is followed across a range of companies, a taxi service, a hotel aggregator, online retail outlets, a payment provider, it provides China with an intrusive, comprehensive profile of an individual and his or her habits, which might not seem like a serious threat, but it's a great danger to our nation. The Chinese government keep a tight control over its media at home. Most of the Western social media apps like Facebook, Twitter, Google, and many of the leading news outlets are banned in China. Large multinational corporations are unwilling to lose the Chinese market and wary of offending the Chinese government. This has given China a veto over free speech in many Western countries, seen recently in the high-profile case of the National Basketball Association, speaking out about the protesters in Hong Kong. Investments in Indian social and other media as well as startups could lead to a subtle push towards the Chinese narrative on bilateral issues and disputes with India. A shift to a more favorable depiction of China and suppression of criticism. For instance, TikTok censors topics that are sensitive to the Chinese government and promote people who praise China. Just Google this and you will come to know many more stories about this weird fact. This kind of influencing by a foreign totalitarian government is detrimental to an open and free society like India. The internet is split into two major camps: the traditional open internet dominated by Western companies like Facebook, Amazon, Netflix, and Google, and the closed Chinese internet, almost like an intranet, which restricts outsiders and is closely monitored and controlled by the state. Companies like Alibaba and Tencent are enablers and beneficiaries of this system. By restricting access to the foreign players, China was able to create its own champions which now rival the West. If Alibaba, Tencent and other Chinese tech majors replicate their internet ecosystems in India, this can create a systematic risk. An ecosystem such as this controls access to end users. It means other companies, retailers, financing firms and media will have to follow the standards, technologies prescribed to them. Alibaba and Tencent will be in position like Google. They can decide which firm will succeed or fail by controlling user access, using their own technologies. Imagine if Indian economy needs to use Chinese tech for critical applications. And you were thinking, what's the harm in using Chinese phone?